sex differences in the ketogenic diet or a low-carb diet generally. Some people are concerned that low-carb diets or ketogenic diets are especially useful for men, but might have a different set of complications for women. And we did have a female expert debate on the show where I asked about the ketogenic diet for women, and the sort of consensus was that it should be treated differently for women.
Yeah. I remember I tuned into that, and I respect it tremendously. I really appreciate the view that a lot of these gals have advocated for, which is that women are not just small men. The differences between male and female, of course, are enormous. That doesn't mean there are differences in everything. So women are very unique when it comes to hormones. Women experience a rhythm of hormones that there is no equivalent in men because of the reproductive burden, if you will, or responsibility that a woman has, where she will see changes in hormones that can reach thousands of times differences. Like progesterone levels can change by 1,000 times over the course of the ovarian cycle. Estrogen levels will change by multiples. Men just don't have that kind of volatility. Those female sex hormones do influence metabolism, but then it matters tremendously which phase she is in of her ovarian cycle. So if she is in the first follicular phase, which is a low progesterone, higher estrogen state.
What's the first follicular phase?
Yeah, so if you look at the female fertility phase, it is like a 200-piece orchestra. It is so dynamic, whereas men's fertility is like a barbershop quartet. It sounds nice, but it's very simple. So in the first phase, leading up, so she's just had her menstruation end, now she's starting the beginning of a new cycle. That first phase is called the follicular phase, which is when her ovaries are having some follicles or a little egg getting bigger. One will end up becoming the dominant one, but that is creeping in higher levels of estrogen. And then she will ovulate. With the ovulation, that what was a follicle in her ovary now becomes what's called a yellow body or a corpus luteum. And so it's called the luteal phase. And that is defined by very high progesterone. And progesterone changes things. So where I think the conversation in women is very relevant and fascinating is that in the first phase, in her follicular phase, she is a fat-burning machine. You can measure. She will get into ketosis faster than her male counterpart, and she's burning more fat than her male counterpart. In fact, this is one of the few clinical values where there's a male version and a female version. This isn't very common. Many of the typical metabolic type markers, whether it's glucose or insulin, triglycerides, LDL cholesterol, they're the same across the sexes, with the exception of free fatty acids. So earlier I had mentioned that when insulin is low, the fat cell is breaking down fat. It's breaking down that fat as free fatty acids. And so the free fatty acids in a woman are about 40 or 50% higher than in a man.
During that first phase?
Yes, especially during the first phase. And that's because she's burning more fat. And that helps her get into ketosis faster. So this has been shown in studies. Take male and female, have them start a fast. She will get into ketosis faster than him. Now, during
that phase, or
especially during the phase, yeah. I don't know that they compared and controlled for the luteal phase, but it's worth noting where I think fasting and ketogenic diets start to change. Yeah, so it'll keep going up. Yeah.
So just done another reading. 0.8.
Yep.
Is ketosis considered 0.5?
Yeah, technically, but frankly, I actually call it ketosis at 0.3. The moment you can detect it on one of those blood meters, I'd say you're in ketosis. And I think 0.3 is the lower limit. So 0.5 is a little bit of an arbitrary cutoff, but that is the classic view. So in that luteal phase with high progesterone is a hunger hormone. And so if she's trying to do a fasting protocol and her cravings are going to be higher and she's going to be hungrier. And so that's where I think the conversation is very important, is that during her luteal phase, after she has ovulated, it's going to be harder to stick to a ketogenic diet. And that's where I think it might be prudent for her to be a little generous with herself, where it might get a little more difficult. Now, however, some of the concern with women and ketogenic diets is misplaced. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention a study that answered this question very well with regards to cortisol. In fact, I'll state this now. I already chatted with the team. I would love to see you bring on a scientist in the UK named Dr. Isabella Cooper. She has published a series of studies in women that are fascinating because of the the intervention that she's done. She's taken women who had been adhering to a ketogenic diet as part of their normal life. Then for 21 days, they have to adopt the typical high-carb diet of the standard UK guidelines, similar to the US, about 55% carbohydrate, decidedly not ketogenic. For 21 days, so more than long enough to detect changes. And then they go back to their diet for 21 days and they have blood tests again. And so these are healthy women who go from a ketogenic diet to a high-carb diet back to a ketogenic diet. And when they looked at cortisol, when Isabella and her group measured cortisol levels, no statistically significant change at any point. There was just noise and no trend. Some gals had their cortisol go down, some had them go up, but as a group, it was just a big, messy, flat line.
And what does that mean?
That takes a lot of wind out of the sails of people who say that a ketogenic diet is a unique stress on women, because people want to invoke, and they'll say, well, cortisol goes through the roof, and that's a sign of a significant stress. And yet Isabella's own data show that cortisol levels aren't different, that there is no unique cortisol-related stress state of a ketogenic diet. So I think it's relevant because it just brings a little nuance to the conversation. Not to say men and women are not different. They absolutely are. But I do believe the view that a ketogenic diet is uniquely stressful in women but not men, I think is overblown. And again, I'm relying on Isabella's own data to support that.
So coming into 2026, and I want 2026 to be the year where I finally get a grip of my health, where I finally become the person that I know deep down I could be and I desperately do want to be. And I asked you, Dr. Ben, to make me a plan, the perfect plan, the perfect diet. I know everyone's different, so you're gonna have to play with me here a little bit, but the perfect plan for 2026. What would you prescribe as a diet, lifestyle choices?
Okay.
And I'm going to write it down.
Yeah. So I would, at the risk of sounding too self-absorbed, I'll kind of describe my own approach as a metabolic scientist, but please everyone listening appreciate that I'm inserting my own constraints, because my approach is kind of that of a guy who knows a lot, but is also constrained by my demands in life. But I think a lot of people fit into that category. So, Stephen, if you want to look like a freckled, bald, wrinkled man, this is what you can do. All right. So first of all, little to no carbs for breakfast and lunch.
Okay, little to no carbs for breakfast and lunch.
Yes.
Carbs for breakfast and lunch.
Yep. You wake up in the morning, anyone who's wearing a continuous glucose monitor will find that their glucose levels naturally rise in the morning, and that coincides with a mild state of insulin resistance every morning because of changes in cortisol and other hormones. So my view is don't doubly load to the glucose that's already happening by eating in the morning with starchy, sugary stuff. So be very strict with all of your meals up until dinner.
So just on point one, so I'm clear, you're saying no carbs, but is there anything that I should be having?
Yeah. So if a person wants to, as much protein and fat as they'd like.
Why?
And I would say, especially for lunch, let lunch be your biggest meal.
Okay, so let's go through those 3 points.
Yeah.
Why as much protein as I can?
Yeah, protein and fat.
Okay, why?
Yeah, because they won't have an insulin effect. And that's the key. Like my approach to staying lean at 50 years old and having my wife like what she sees is keeping my insulin low and still not being hungry all the time. And so protein and fat are the two macronutrients, with carbohydrates being the third, but protein and fat have little to no effect on insulin. Fat has none, and protein may have a modest effect depending on some other variables. So you want to keep insulin low.
So what would that breakfast look like?
So for me, I actually don't eat breakfast.
Okay.
And again, this plays into, I'm extremely mindful of my family. So that's going to come back again when we get to dinner, because we've left that meal untouched for now. In the morning, I make breakfast for my kids every morning. And it's something I remember from my childhood, being raised by my dad. And every morning it was just structured. And I think all of my siblings and I have thrived in life, in part because of the structure we had at the beginning of every day, where we would all eat breakfast together. We would read scriptures very briefly, would have a family prayer very briefly, and just review the day. And I think that was my dad's way of kind of surviving with so many kids, just to sort of check in with everyone.
You had 9 siblings.
Yeah, there's 9 of us, yeah. And so we have, I'm very big on that. So breakfast is dad's domain, and my wife cheers me on. So I make breakfast for the kids, and I am sipping on a cup of yerba mate the whole time.
Why?
Yeah, in part because I like the taste. There's a good GLP-1 effect, so it helps me feel a little more satiated. And it's just a habit. It's a little bit of a perk, a little pick-me-up. I don't drink coffee. I drink yerba mate instead.
What is yerba mate?
The brand that I get is called Unamate, and it's a leaf. It's a South American tea, basically. And you can get it in a number of ways. This is just a really convenient and good way to get it. So I'm sipping on a cup of, it would be someone drinking coffee or tea. I'm taking yerba mate tea. So I don't eat for breakfast. I find that I'm not generally hungry for breakfast anyway, and so I may as well keep my fasted state going a little longer. So that's what works for me. And then I would encourage people to have a big hearty lunch. Because if you have a big hearty lunch, mostly protein and fat, it makes it easier to taper off later in the day, especially in the evening. If people are noticing that they have significant cravings, especially for carbs, because that's the only thing anyone craves, in the evening, have a bigger lunch. See if that helps.
Okay.
And then sometime around, either before or after, have a good resistance workout. I have my resistance workout in fact, Stephen, I even have to go a little earlier. So my first thing in the morning is I go on a ruck. At 5 a.m., I have my weighted vest and these 15-pound kettlebells, and I hike 1 mile up a hill and 1 mile back every morning at 5 a.m. And then I get a little work done, and it's just some personal kind of reflection and meditation time, if you will. Then the family wakes up. I'm making breakfast. The family chaos begins. I'm sipping on my yerba mate. Then I go to work. About 10:30 or 11 is the good time for me. I go down to the gym on campus, and I do my very brief, very effective, I would say, resistance training. And then I go into the sauna for 12 to 15 minutes. But in the morning, I've done a little ice bath, too. I didn't mention that. I have an ice bath on my back patio, a Morozka Forge, and I love it. It is spectacular. So then I do a sauna session after my workout. Then I go eat my big lunch.
Why are you doing the ice bath in the sauna
Yeah,
session?
so I do an ice bath in the morning because it helps me sleep better in the evening. I'm a terrible sleeper. And especially in the northern hemisphere in the winter, the sun isn't coming up till 9 o'clock or so, 9 a.m. And by shocking my body, I get this jolt, and I think it just helps get my clock ticking. And so by the time evening rolls around, I'm tired and I'm ready for bed.
Okay, I'm just doing my ketone test to see where it is. We're probably about 30 minutes off me taking that ketone shot. We'll continue with your day in just 2 secs. And I'm now at 0.9.
It'll keep going. Yep. So you were 0.8, 0.9. Next one will be 1. But it looks like it's starting to curve a little bit, which isn't surprising. You went up pretty quick, and then it's going to curve for a bit.
And what's going on in my body right now that I have 0.9 blood ketone?
Yeah. So that is a unit of measurement called the millimoles. And so it's looking at the number of molecules basically in a given amount of your blood. And so you took in that ketone precursor, the liver converted it, is just continuing to convert it into BHB.
BHB being ketones?
BHB being the main ketone. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's making me...
Well, it's going to make you sharp.
Okay.
So your brain is now using those ketones. Your heart would be using the ketones. And your reliance on glucose as a fuel for your brain and your heart would be going down.
Would my hunger be going down?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to be less hungry.
Yeah, but also the benefits of BHB in the brain are myriad, where it's been shown to be an anxiolytic, so it can control anxiety. It can improve depression. It can help with attention.
Memory.
Certainly with cognition. Yeah.
I read about the studies on dementia patients.
Yes, it is incredibly, we're entering a kind of dawning of an era of ketone research where the number of NIH and NSF funded ketone related projects is wonderful. It's thrilling to see where it's going to be a wonderful decade of a lot of great biomedical research on the metabolism of ketones.
Do you know something I've noticed? Most commercial teams aren't tested by their targets. They're tested by the weight of the admin that comes with every client. All the follow-ups, all the meetings, all the notes, the timelines that never ever stop. These were a constant source of friction in my commercial team until I introduced our sponsor, Pipedrive. If you're not familiar, Pipedrive is a simple but powerful sales CRM that gives you visibility on any deals through a sales pipeline. It also automates a lot of the tedious, repetitive, and time-consuming tasks that come with the sales process. I've used it across my investments for almost a decade now, even when I was at Social Chain. And it's so effective in part because it's customizable. We've been able to tailor it for different teams depending on how they work. Pipedrive also scales with your business, and you can also link it to over 500 different apps. It is hands down my favorite CRM tool. Try it right now for free for 30 days, no credit card or payment required, just using my link below, or you can go to pipedrive.com/CEO to get started. That's pipedrive.com/CEO. So let's go back to the perfect day, the perfect diet, the perfect lifestyle for 2026. So then do my resistance training at some point after I've had my breakfasts?
Well, yeah, so whatever, for me, I do body weight based exercises, so I don't like having a big belly of food. And so being in a fasted state, my view on exercising, even that's a debate. Do you exercise fasted or do you exercise with fuel? Like you take a bunch of carbs and stuff. My view is it's dependent on what your goal is. As a middle-aged guy, my goal is not performance. It's not going out and sprinting and showing power. It's to live a long, healthy life. And so it's a more metabolic focus. If your interest is metabolic, then I think exercising in a fasted state is very smart. If your goal of the exercise is performance, like you're a collegiate athlete, or you're an elite rugby player or something, okay, then don't exercise fasted. Take some fuel before you go work out. So for me, I've done my early morning ruck, my personal kind of reflection time, ice bath, yerba mate, and then my mid-morning workout.
Just on that point of exercising fasted, why is that better if your goals are longevity and health?
Right, because it's just going to help you continue to burn fat and maintain your insulin sensitivity.
Okay, fine.
So I have my mid-morning workout, then I have a nice big lunch, then I have my afternoon productivity, and then I get to dinner. And dinner is the main social meal within my home. And so I have dinner with my family, and that is carte blanche. Whatever the family's eating, I'm eating. I have daughters, and as a college professor, I've seen enough young women struggle with eating disorders that I always worried, would my incessant talking about diet somehow stimulate eating disorders? And I've never wanted to become obsessive about it. And so I have dinner with my family. Whatever it is. If it's pizza, I'm having pizza. If it's pasta, I'm having pasta. Now, my wife happens to see things kind of the way I do, so it's usually meat and vegetables in some mix. And that's my dinner. And then ideally, I'm done.
What time are you having that dinner?
Yeah, that's about 5 or 6.
And you avoid eating late?
Oh, yes. In fact, I would submit, Stephen, if we were to look at any one thing someone could do, I would say anyone who says, Ben, what is the one thing? If I'm putting a question in your mouth, I'd say stop snacking in the evening. Anything you can do to not overeat and go to bed hyperglycemic or elevated or spike your blood glucose levels, do it.
Why?
That's when people are at their weakest. People, you and I could be hanging out all day, walking past a plate of cookies and not be tempted at all until 7 or 8 p.m. It's just human nature. And yet that is one of the worst times to eat it, because when you go to bed hyperglycemic, it activates a part of the nervous system, an aspect of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. That's also known as the fight or flight. So when we hear a car crash right nearby, or we hear a gunshot, then immediately our heart starts beating faster and harder, our body temperature climbs, and we're stimulated. Hyperglycemia will have that effect, and that is terrible timing, because when you're going to bed, you're wanting to rely on what's called your parasympathetic nervous system, the aspect of your nervous system that is calming. It's lowering your heart rate. It's slowing your heart. It's lowering your blood pressure. It's helping you calm down to sleep better. Hyperglycemia throws that into opposite. So then you're going to bed, you're lying there wondering why your heart is beating so hard, why you are so hot and uncomfortable, and it's because you just spiked your blood glucose with a bunch of sugar.
Is there anything else? Is there, for people that are focused on that 2026 goal of finally becoming the person that they know they can become, is there anything else you would say to them? Is there any tools they need to buy? Is there any other tricks or tactics or hacks?
Yeah. I do think that they could, if they were adopting this diet, it's definitely going to put them into ketosis. That can take a little time to adjust. So very relevant to our earlier conversation, I do think exogenous ketones can help a person transition into relying on a ketogenic diet more readily. And anytime a person's losing weight, they run the risk of losing some lean mass at the same time. And my lab just published a paper about 2 weeks ago at the time we're filming this, finding that in humans, in a weight loss protocol, if they were drinking BHB or exogenous ketones, they were able to retain more muscle mass, more lean mass in the midst of the weight loss. So there could be some strategies like that. But I would also add that there are some non-physical ones as well. If someone's trying to say I'm going to be the best version of myself, then start reading more too. Read more books. You'll be the best. You'll be an even better version. As you're losing weight, and your brain is firing on more cylinders than ever before as it's fueled with ketones, challenge your brain. You had mentioned dementia earlier. Ketones are a therapy for dementia, but so too is challenging your brain in the form of making it learn new things. So read a good book.
This woman contacted me on November the 11th. When you do a podcast, you get lots of feedback. You get tens of thousands of people sometimes per episode.
And I can imagine you looking through everyone, finding the gems.
I actually, funnily enough, I do look at the comment section because it's a place where I really trust the feedback. So people that comment on these videos, like I really do trust them because they are typically listeners. They've kind of been with me on this whole journey. Yeah. So when they have feedback, when they have, good or bad feedback or constructive feedback, we pay attention.
Well, Stephen, I'm pleased that something brought me back. So the comments can't have been too negative.
No, they were unbelievably positive. But I got this one on LinkedIn from a lady called, I'll keep her anonymous. Let's just call her Mrs. L.
Okay.
And Mrs. L said, "Hi, Stephen, thank you for the great work you do and the information, insights, and inspiration you provide. On keto, my husband lasted 8 hours on a keto diet and was unconscious. It turned out he had a neuroendocrine cancer called insulinuria."
A neuroendocrine cancer called insulinoma.
I said, that's exactly what I said.
Yeah. Did I hear a niner in there? Yeah, something.
And if the paramedics hadn't intercepted with glucose, going keto would have killed him.
Yes.
He's amazing. We have 3 children and he volunteers for 50 more every weekend. We don't want to lose him. Sorry to share this sad story, but it's not the first time I've seen one of your posts or one of your guests talk about ketosis and what's worked well. And in this case, it was fatal for him.
Yes.
So I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to share this with love, respect, and kindness to hopefully give food for thought, no pun intended, of how you decide to use your platform and to provide further context and nuance.
Yeah.
What works for you and thousands of others might not work for everyone. I believe it's super important that we share this information and inspiration carefully and in a way that exemplifies a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. For example, not a fixed one diet or one way of working for everybody. If you read this, above all else, please know I'm sending this with the utmost respect and kindness and hope. Best.
Love it. Yeah, what a thoughtful message. Yeah, it is very thoughtful. I appreciate any kind communication, by the way, because on social media, it is so easy just to become the worst version of yourself without fear of any consequence. So she happened to describe a person who would probably be the worst individual. So an insulinoma, she describes a neuroendocrine cancer. An insulinoma is an insulin-secreting tumor. So usually it's the pancreas, which for those watching is here again. Imagine that a part of the pancreas is expanding with a tumor, but it's filled with cells that make insulin. So it's a bunch of beta cells, which are the cells that make insulin. And this is a guy who can't stop making insulin. Suffice to say, if you now cut your carbohydrate consumption and you're continuing to make tons of insulin, which is not normal. So this is very much a disease state, and I appreciate her stating it as such. It's a cancer. It's a tumor of the pancreas. So what would have happened in him, he cuts his carbohydrates, but he can't stop making insulin. So now it's actually back to that diet that I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, where the people were eating a high carb version or a low carb version of a diet. When you spike insulin, you lower both glucose and ketones. And that's what happened to him. He would have become hypoglycemic, and he would almost never make any ketones because he always has high insulin. And so he would have been depriving his brain of its 2 fuels in lowering the glucose by pushing it into muscle and fat and blocking the liver from making ketones. So he's the worst person. Anyone with an insulinoma, of course, neither you nor I are giving any medical advice, but if a person has an insulinoma, that's like the worst person to adopt a low-carb diet. They have to eat carbs because they're always making insulin. They can't stop.
What's interesting is it appears from what she's written that her husband found out that he had this
Oh, because of adopting the diet.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's remarkable. Yeah. So a person could test this early though, Stephen. So just what you've been doing now over the past period of time by pricking your finger, if a person worried that they had an insulinoma, they could just on a random morning or fast for 12 hours or so and measure your glucose. If you have a continuous glucose monitor, even easier, look at your glucose. Because in you and I, if we fast for 24 hours, our glucose levels stay normal. They just run along like nothing's happened. In a person with an insulinoma, they're getting lower and lower and lower and lower constantly because they can't stop making insulin. And it's always driving their blood glucose levels lower. So a person could determine that on their own. This would have been a guy who anytime he fasted at all, he would have started to feel miserable.
Because she says in the message, my husband lasted 8 hours on a keto diet and was unconscious. It turned out, which suggests that they found out.
And we hope the husband's doing well.
Yes.
Boy, an insulinoma is a big deal. My hope is that they would be able to identify the location of the tumor. And you can. What's cool about cancer is that cancer is such a sugar eater. It eats so much glucose that you can inject glucose into someone that has a little bit of radiation to it, not harmful, but then you can do an X-ray and see where does all the glucose go, and it would be going to this little lump on the pancreas, and so hopefully they can cut it out.